the age function can be used to take a look at time frames. And actually, I'll talk about one of my largest findings ever was using the age function. But let's take a look at it simply. This data file is from a long time ago, so it's going to be easier actually just to enter in the data. So I'm just going to do that here, and I can select from here December 31st, 1996, which I know is the latest date in the file. Now I'm going to do this on entered date, and notice that the age on feature will only work with date fields. Again, the enter date had data in it throughout the time frame and was therefore a good date to go on, and it seemed to end around 12/26, 1996. So in the aging periods we have 0, 30, 60, 90, 120, and we can continue this as much as we like, maybe go a little bit further, and obviously they do need to increase in size as you go forward. We can then select the invoice amount and select OK, and that will produce this aging report. Now I like this report, and again I'll share a finding a while back. In this data we may not be able to find it exactly, but if you select the command here again, bring it up into your command line, select the edit command, we can bring us back to where we were just a second ago. And the finding that I had was, we selected the if button, if the invoice amount was less than 0. And again, this data may not have the most of this, but in looking at the data, we tried to look at what credits were entered a long time ago. And sure enough, we had found that there were a lot of open credits or debits, whatever you want to call them, negative items. These are receivables from your vendors because we're working with an accounts payable file in this particular case. And what I was able to find in doing this aging report was that they had a lot of open credits and therefore a lot of open receivables with vendors, but they were very old and therefore hard to find on all of the reporting that they were currently getting out of the system. So this report, if you will, it's a very simple report, but it ended up finding quite a bit of money. And again, all we did was take a look at these old kind of invoice amount items that were entered a long time ago. So just to note, in taking a look at the actual report, it will obviously take the date 1996 12/31 and work backwards 0 to 29, 30 to 59, etc., going throughout the report, this I guess being about 2 years out and forward. And again, this is just the negative items here. However, it does provide you with a good summary. Of course, then we have the count of items, the percent of count, and percent of field, and that field being this invoice amount field over here. So again, this is more pointing to the left, this one pointing more towards the right. Now, one thing that you might want to do before you age your file is actually to go in and run statistics again. Now, looking at, say, the check date, enter date, and invoice date, let's take a look at the three. So the check date has a lot of empty dates and may not be the best for aging. The enter date does look very consistent, starting around the October time frame of the previous year and going through the end of 12/26. And then the invoice dates, again, looking very consistent as well. Either enter date or invoice date would work. But what you do is you take that highest value, be it invoice or entered, and that highest value is what you're then entering into the age function as your cutoff date. Again, just being able to either select it, however you want to do that, or type it in. So another command that we can use is the classify command, and in a way I'm going to show you how to use the classify command to be a bit of an age function that might even be more beneficial, or one that's a little bit easier to read. So let's just quickly do the classify command. So I have a field in classify called pay year month that I'll classify on. This is a field that has for every payment date the year and month that took place. Now in classifying, you want to be a little careful. This is a bit of a quick command. It's going to pre-sort it for you and automatically write to your log file, again the log file down here, the actual results. So you want to be a bit careful. You don't want to summarize, say, on vendor number where there's 4,000, let's say. Well, out of 729 records, there may only be 30, but so that might still work for this file. But in general terms, if you do have say 1,000 vendors, 2,000 vendors, you don't want to classify. Classify has a limit of 1,000 records when you're in the log file. So you want to classify on things like a debit memo code or a manual check indicator or a pay year month that might have, say, 20 or 30 items just on average. So again, pay year month, invoice amount, we'll just hit the OK button. And that will classify on that pay year month. So let's go back to that command again. Just it's accumulating the invoice amount, pay year month, and we'll hit OK again. And again, giving you that classification report. So in looking at this summary, you have the year as well as the month. We have a few items that do not have a check date, and that's where you have a blank. And we're going to talk about how we created this field. But this is an interesting way to age your data. And a lot of times when I look at data files, I like to look for situations where, say, February and March are missing completely from the file. And you start to wonder, why don't I have checks for those months? And a lot of times they forgot to run that report or include that file in the data. And these are ways that we can catch that as opposed to waiting for them to tell us. Now, in order to create that pay year month and classify, again, the classify command does provide quite a bit of information here with regards to the percent of count and percent of field, which would be over on the right here. But again, just now it's taking a look at that table layout in the pay year month category. What I've done is I've created a calculated field. It is in the file that you'll get, and it shows you a date which will now turn this check date, a true date, into a bit of a character field. And now that it's a character field, it's not a date or in a numeric-ish format. It's going to be more of a ASCII or EBCDIC format now. I can then substring that and carry out, in this case, from the last, starting at the 7th digit of that date and going for 4, or getting, and in this case, getting the month starting at the 1 and then going for 2. But let me show you what this 1 and 2 and 7 and 4 means. It's a little easier to see this. If you go to your Tools, Options, what you can find in your date options is whatever date format you'd like to have. And that display format will be utilized by ACL when carrying out this sub function, or excuse me, date function. So in this case, when we apply the date function, I now know I have mm/dd/ and then this is the 7th digit, YYYY for 4 digits. In the beginning I had MM, which is starting at 1 going for 2, and that's therefore this substring of that character now field based on the date function. And I've added that together with a little bit of a small underline mark, and adding that together creates pay year month. Now if I just wanted to get the pay year, I can delete this part. If I just want to get the pay month, I can delete that part. So it's a pretty versatile way of getting a bit of a better way of showing maybe the aging function. So you might want to normally run an age function that'll put it in these number buckets, but a lot of people always forget when the cutoff date is, and kind of makes it more confusing. This one sometimes is a little bit easier to read, and you can more easily see where months are completely missing. So just continuing with the aging and function here, you can do a quick summarize, and without going deeply into this command right now, just quickly running it, I can summarize on the enter date field, accumulate the invoice amount, and do this to a file called enter date sum. Now that will quickly produce for me a daily graph, if you will, of money, which could easily be put into Excel and graphed, and or just reviewed within ACL for high points and low points, be it in amount or account. Now you could scroll down like I've done here, or you might want to just kind of sort it by right clicking that column and selecting quick sort descending, for example, quick sort descending, and you can see some of the larger days in the time frame. Another idea, maybe follow this up with a stratify command. So now we're adding together commands here, but now that we've summarized it into more of a date format, you could then stratify this date to identify any of the high points or low points that would occur within the time frame. Again, a high point would be 28, low point, in this case, let's scroll all the way down, would be 1. And again, just to even high level this, if we take the count field and run a statistics, we can very quickly get an average of 3 checks or entered a day, or invoices are entered a day, but again, also kind of get a idea of some of the highest items as well as lowest items rather quickly.